program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
We'll call this meeting to order. Welcome to the March 16th, 2020 meeting of the Eau Claire Plan Commission. We'll have a couple of special notifications here when I get through this initial introduction, but this meeting is being broadcast live by Valley Media Works on Charter Channel 994, WRFP-LP 101.9 FM, and online at valleymediaworks.org. The Plan Commission attempts to conduct its public hearings in a relatively informal manner, with the constraint that we must deal with the issues before us in an orderly and businesslike fashion. We give the applicant an opportunity to speak first, and then others either for or against a proposal are each permitted to speak once. We do request that everyone restrict their comments to the issues before us, avoid unnecessary repetition, and be prudent in the use of time. We want to be sure that everyone has an adequate time to review and discuss all items with equal diligence. Please remember to turn your cell phones to off or silent during the meeting. If you do wish to speak, there's yellow slips or gold slips of paper on the back there. If you would fill those out with your name, address, hand them to Mr. Petrie up in the front, and then introduce yourself with your name and address at the microphone. You might notice that our setup is a little bit different. We're trying to keep some distance with deference to the current illness that we're dealing with in our country. We ask that you be mindful of your neighbors. If you feel like you need to cough or something, please step away and make sure that we're not, sharing anything that could be a problem. I noticed that just a few minutes ago, there's a news report that Governor Evers has banned all gatherings in Wisconsin of more than 50 people. I counted us up here and we are below that mark, so we'll continue with the meeting. Just be mindful of your neighbors. We have, let's see, we have 4 items for public hearing in which we will ask for comments from the public on these items. The first item is was postponed from our Plan Commission on March 2nd. It's a public hearing for a recommendation to the City Council on a rezoning and adopt the general development plan for a quick trip at 3801 Gateway Drive. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you, Chairperson. Before you tonight is item number 1, which is located on the southeast side of the city. This was postponed, as the chairperson mentioned, at your last meeting, and the applicant is here tonight to speak on behalf of this agenda item. The proposal, as shown on the map here, location map, it's currently zoned temporary C3. The adjacency to the south is Highway 53 and Gateway Drive. To the north, to the east, and to the west is all zone C3P. Here's an aerial photograph showing the parcel, and you may remember this from your previous meeting. We did have a staff report on it. The staff report did add a little more information regarding some of the questions that were raised by this commission, and Ms. Ness will get up after this, my presentation, and present her items. So Quick Trip is proposing to rezone this property to TC3 to C3P to build their store with fuel and car wash. The comprehensive plan identifies this area as commercial. Attached in your packet is the site plan narrative and building elevations. Some history of the property: it was annexed into the city of Eau Claire in 1990. The owners at that time did not want to sell to Walmart, which was built in the early 90s. Today, there is still a single-family home there with a detached garage, and my understanding, the owner has passed away and the home is vacant. The proposed site plan is noted in your packet. The approximate store is 8,300 square feet, again, with storage area and a car wash. The narrative is shown with the brick facade. As typical Quick Trips are, this is a larger footprint than the usual stores that they have built. The required parking, as noted, is 34 stalls. They're proposing 39 stalls. They're showing 2 access points, and Ms. Ness can get into that too, onto Gateway Drive. Also, they're proposing 1 access into the existing Walmart parking lot. The site plan does include movement of vehicles such as large semis for deliveries to the store, as noted in the report. Pedestrian access is shown on from the front door to the public sidewalk along Gateway Drive. The landscape plan, as shown, does show street trees, foundation plantings, and other landscaping within the site. Bicycle parking should be added to the site plan. The proposed signage isn't noted in your report, and they will be reviewed by a permit and meet C3 district standards. At this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Ness, and she can talk about some of the conversations that we had at our previous meeting, and then staff will be available for questions. And then, like I mentioned, the applicant is here this evening.
Good evening. We are working with the clients regarding the traffic impact analysis. We've received the initial review in which they have provided trip generation and distribution and analysis of the driveway access points. The northern access point onto Gateway Drive, which is shared with Walmart access, and existing driveway on the west of Gateway Drive. And then also the 2 driveways on Gateway to the site, along with the access, we'll call it the southern access to the Walmart driveway. We've looked at the analysis. The trip generation is very reasonable in comparison to other TIAs that Quick Trip has submitted in our area. The trip generation is actually very conservative. It's looking at using 30% pass-by trips, where at other locations they've used the maximum pass-by trips that WSDOT allows, which is 55%. So we're analyzing more traffic than, let's say, they could reduce the amount of trips by utilizing that reduction factor, but they are not. The land use is concurrent with what has been planned for in the past. The original Parsons traffic impact analysis showed a commercial use in this area. The updated SEH analysis in 2003 also showed commercial retail, hotel use for this area. And in that study, it breaks out the whole mall area and divides it into sections. The land areas that this parcel is included with was a hotel, restaurant, high turnover restaurant, freestanding discount store, and hotel land use. So similar trip generations. So right now, the city, Eau Claire County, and the DOT are looking at Gulf Road and an analysis of the signalized system just north of Gateway here. And included in that analysis is the Gateway and Gulf Road intersection. We do not have that analysis back, and I don't have further analysis requests of Quick Trip until we see that traffic impact analysis done on Gulf Road at this time. But the generation in which the Quick Trip is showing seems in line with what has been done previously in the area, and it falls within the land use that we were expecting here. The site plan up on the screen, we talked about that a little at the last meeting with the turning movement showing the need for the wider driveways. And we require that anytime they're over 30 feet to show that the need is there for the truck turning movements.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission for staff? Commissioner Peterson.
Yes, if we were to approve this for rezoning, in that the final analysis of the TIA for the intersection north of there is still pending, who has the final say-so on that TIA and approving this? Would it be the city council then? Would they wait until that TIA is done for the major intersection?
Typically, we've recommended approval based on the TIA being approved by staff. We haven't had the city council approve the traffic impact analysis. It could be done that way, but we've left the analysis portion open for the development agreement or the site approval based on meeting the guidelines of the TIA, which are the WSDOT standards.
If I may. So both approval by this body and the city council would then be predicated on approval of the TIA by staff? Okay. And secondly, if I may, or thirdly, on page 6, it talks about these land uses accounted for approximately 900 trips between the 3 identified parcels. Do you know what those 3 identified parcels were?
The 3 identified parcels were, there is a retail strip mall on the east side of Gateway Drive, just north of Goodwill.
Okay.
It has like a Papa Murphy's and
Tobacco shop.
and
Yep.
then there's a Grand Stay, I believe, hotel that is right in that area. That's identified as one of the parcels. And then this is the 3rd parcel that's identified.
Okay. Okay. Thank you much. Thank you.
Any other questions from Commissioner Gregor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Ness, I guess if you could go into maybe a little bit more detail about some of the terminology, it might be helpful. You mentioned the pass-by, was it?
The pass-by trips.
Yeah, do you think you could speak to what that means a little bit more? Because I guess what I'm interpreting, and that's just people in the area that they happen to see the Quick Trip and they're like, oh, I'll do that because I'm already in the area. And then I guess the other part of the question would be, what percentage of people do you see coming off the freeway finding this as a destination or something like that? Because I'm assuming that's the other side of the coin there.
So when we look at the traffic generated by an individual site, we look at just the site alone and the number of trips that they are going to generate. And then as the overall area, since there's multiple businesses in this area, it's more than likely that an individual may make multiple stops within the area. Those are called linked trips. And so there was no percentage taken out for the linked trips. The pass-by trips, there was 30% taken out for this analysis with the Quick Trip site. And those are people who are truly going north on 53. They see the gas station, they're gonna come in, stop, and then go back north on 53. Or east-west. So we take that into account, and then we look at the distributions along the system too on how that traffic is going to get to the site as well.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, thank you. Is the applicant here? Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Scott Tigan, and the first thing I have on my list is I apologize for missing a meeting 2 weeks ago. I would have been here Tuesday night. I've done this for 30 years, and it's the first time that I screwed up so badly, so please accept my apology. Ryan and Ms. Ness did an excellent job of explaining the site plan. We do these nice, beautiful pictures, so I'd be remiss if I didn't at least show this to you. I could pass it around if you care to see it. We also have the site plan in a little prettier than the black and white. Our sign is planned to be here. This driveway that comes into the Walmart parking lot will move over Walmart, and we're making good progress talking with Walmart. They would like that to move over to line up with one of their drive lanes in their parking lot. So this would slide over maybe 12 to 15 feet. You understand why we need the 35 feet here. It's because our semi services this, and that'll be the only semi that's in here is our delivery truck. Semis just aren't going to come in here to come to this facility. This is strictly a small vehicle store. That we've identified this area as a hole in our market area, and we think it would be a nice addition to this part of the community. In just defining the traffic a little bit more, we are a convenience store, and we live off the traffic that's going by. Now, our visibility from 53 out here will be very good, and we will pull a little bit of traffic off there. And if you take Ms. Ness's 30% that we might get from there, that would probably equate to the traffic up there at Gulf Road to maybe somewhere between 5 and 10% of additional traffic there. So we'd like to think we could pull them all off, but we're really not that good. So that's a little discussion about the site plan. But there's no question we're targeting, for the most part, the existing traffic that's in the Walmart parking lot. One question that came up was, can we save any of the existing trees? And we always try to do that if we can, but when you get a small site like this, for us it's a small site, you end up having to grade the whole site, and two things is to grade it right and do it right the first time, the trees have to go, and the second thing is the trees are nearly at the end of their useful life anyway. So that's all I can say about the trees. The question came up about the dumpster location. And we do our site plan, and it's right here. We do our site plans, and always the big issue is, where are we going to put the dumpster? You certainly don't want it in the front yard. And you can't really get it over here. So this is really the only place on this site that the dumpster really works. So try as we may, we can't find a better place to put it. So that's the dumpster. Bicycle parking should have been shown on here, but it'll be over on this corner of the building somewhere. We always put bicycle parking in. Issue about a sidewalk. We're talking with Walmart about putting a sidewalk alongside this curb cut here, and possibly one extending from our walkway here right out into here. So if we have our druthers, we'll get two sidewalks. But we do have to deal with Walmart, and this is not real important parking for them, but they all hesitate to give up a parking stall, and we're nipping them for a few over there already. On the storm ponding, we're doing underground storm ponding system, which will be under the ground here and here. It's a very expensive system to do, but it's what we have to do on small sites like this. With that, I can take any questions, and I thank you again for your time, and you're accepting my apology, and I thank you for your support.
Thank you. Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm wondering if you would just explain to me now, when you talk about underground ponding, that must be why there's not going to be a basement on this one.
We don't put basements in most of our stores.
That was going to be my question, is I didn't realize, it was noted in your description several times, and I thought, oh, wasn't aware that they were ever with basements, but they don't usually have
We-
basements.
We probably got a dozen with basements in,
Okay,
but not
thank you,
today.
thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Granlund?
Thank you. I was curious, looks like there's a preparation to separate off the north end of this parcel for a reason. It looked like that's where some of the temporary rain drainage goes to. Is that expected to become a new parcel? There's no,
There's discussion with the property owner here, Larry Langor, who's the property owner who leases to Walmart. And in exchange for this, the sidewalk, and bringing our utility easement over to hook into Walmart's, or the public utility that's on the Walmart property, this is what we have to exchange to accomplish that. So he's got a design there for, I think, a dual-use building, is his plan. But that's why that's vacant at this time. I'm sure he'll be before you, pretty soon too.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? I see none. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And this is a public hearing. Are there members of the public who came to speak on this tonight? Just let us know your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Arnie Clevin. My address is 1527 Marquette Street in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I'm from Clevin Real Estate, and I'm the listing agent for the property for Irene Cardinal Estate at 3801 Gateway Drive. The personal rep for the property could not be here tonight and has asked me to speak on their behalf. As you know, Irene Cardinal lived in the property and for 66 years since it was built in 1952. She passed away in 2018, and the property is vacant, and it is the desire of the estate to sell the property. The property has become a burden for the sellers, trying to clear the sidewalk of over 500 feet, which had to be hired out. Maintaining the yard, the lot of approximately 2 acres has also been a burden, and then payment for real estate taxes has been a burden. In communication on an email with Ryan Petrie, he said the existing zoning of TC3 means that the existing land use and structure is the only thing allowed within a TC3 district. So it's the request of the sellers that the property, which is surrounded by commercial properties, that the sellers would like the property to be rezoned from temporary commercial zoning, which is TC3, to permanent commercial zoning so they can sell the property. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public who came to speak on this topic tonight? Anyone else to speak on the quick trip? All right. We will see if we have a motion among the commission. Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. I move approval on this project.
Commissioner Granlund.
I'll second that.
All right. Any discussion from the commission? I see Commissioner Christopherson.
I do want to simply amplify the questions about traffic, and I thought that the TIA has appropriate information for us to make necessary approvals, and I think this is such an appropriate addition to that streetway. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that passes. Congratulations. Item number 2 is a public hearing for recommendation to the City Council for rezoning and a preliminary plat at Caden Court and Aspen Ridge Drive. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you. Before you tonight is agenda item number 2, located on the northwest side of the community. Mr. Ivory did an excellent map here showing the proposal before you. The TR1A property was annexed to the city. The remaining R1 property is existing inside the city. This property is completely in the Chippewa County. The proposal before you tonight is to rezone the temporary R1A and R1 to R1 and R1 or R2P for single-family and twin home development. Also, there's a preliminary plat before you for a subdivision known as Walnut Grove. Here's an aerial photograph showing the existing parcels that are to be rezoned. I did include in the PowerPoint presentation the existing, you can see most of the homes in this area have been built. This area was taken from Chippewa County in 2018. So this area was shown from 2013, so you can see how this neighborhood has developed over the last 5 to 7 years. Also in your packet is the preliminary plat as Walnut Grove, and we'll get to that in the presentation. The property to be rezoned is approximately 18 plus or minus acres. The applicant tonight is Real Land Surveying on behalf of the property owners, C&M Builders and Real Estate. As I mentioned, the property that is being rezoned this evening was annexed by the City Council back in January of this year. The project proposal in front of you this evening is 89 lots with 61 for single family, 28 lots or 14 structures for twin home development. The development is similar to the existing development to Aspen Meadows subdivision. As noted on the screen, the first phase of the subdivision was for the 4 units, but as they transition to the west and northwest, there's a mixture of twin homes and single-family homes. The comprehensive plan identifies this area as low-density residential. The proposal of R1 and R2P is consistent with that proposal. Also, the applicant did provide a narrative explaining the situation with the current developer is working on Camden Place to the south and southeast along Jeffers Road. It has been very successful, and you would like to continue doing twin homes within the neighborhood along with single family in this neighborhood. The preliminary plat as shown does show the street layout and the lot layout. As mentioned before, there'll be 89 total lots, 61 of them for single family, 28 lots or 14 structures for the twin home development. The final plat and developer's agreement would need to be reviewed at a later date. The comprehensive plan does encourage a variation within the design of new structures within a new neighborhood, so staff is recommending a condition be added for a variation within the duplex design, colors, siding, and other features within the project. The utility easements were sent to Exxon Energy, AT&T, and Charter and will be shown on the final plat. This agenda item will be considered by the City Council on their next meeting, which is March 23rd. With that, the engineering report is noted in the report as well. There is a few conditions. I would like to point out number 3, which provides information on the proposed streets. Street grades over 10% shall be approved by this commission. There may be some streets that are over that, and we would recommend this request be forwarded on the final plat when it is submitted to staff, which will become at a later date. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions this evening. Oh, I would like to mention too, we did receive an email from Ms. Mosley tonight supporting the project and explaining the figures within that project and some of the data behind it. Also, we did receive one phone call. Unfortunately, the individual would not be able to attend this evening, but is in support of it as well. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson.
The need or the desire, maybe more the need, necessity to have over 10% grades on some of the roads, that'll come with the final plat and come back to us for approval then?
That is correct. I would like to point out, this is in your packet as well. This is showing the preliminary slopes of greater than 20%. And the engineer and applicant are present at this meeting tonight, and they may be able to talk more to that. We would just ask the applicant to identify those slopes on the final plat. That is correct.
One more thing, if I may, just in observation with the access being on the outside of that curve on County Trunk Highway F, The sight distance in both directions is very, very good, so I think it's a very appropriate access point.
Absolutely, and that will have to be reviewed by Chippewa County. And they did mention preliminary approvals, and the applicant may explain that a little more, but it appears the Highway Department will approve that access as proposed.
They have significant stopping sight distance there, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Thank you, Mr. Petrie. Is the applicant here? Welcome.
Good evening. Cody Phillipsack, C&M Properties, 6176 Sandstone Road, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Yeah, we're bringing this forward. We've been working on this site, to own part of this land for 3 years, I believe, and been working on a long time. Just picked up the other parcel last year. And like I said, I put a lot of time into it. I think we have a really good plan. We have 14 twin home buildings and 61 single families, making it a mixture between the twin homes going into more of the entry level new houses, and then some executive type lots and different areas kind of to the north there. So we're gonna have a good mixture, different types of housing, which we've done in a lot of different developments now. So I think it'll flow good, and and the plan is good. You know, the issue, we've been building twin homes for 15 years now in the Chippewa Valley. We started in Altoona and got them to bring the zoning in, and that always is the biggest roadblock, I would say. I don't know how many of you guys remember Camden, where we wanted to make it all twin homes and had to go back and change half of it to single families, which was fine, and it worked out. I would have rather had it all twin homes, because to date we've sold or have offers on 40 of the twin homes. It's all sold out. Since I talked to Ryan, we sold the last two. The prices on the twin home units are $175 to $195, depending on what model people select. Of the 40, the average price has come in at $210,000. With upgrades and different things, a lot of people are putting more into it. The single families, which haven't done too bad in there, we have sold 12. I think we have 16 to 19 lots left, so about half of those we've sold. Average price on those has been $288,000, with a starting price of $240,000. So the twin homes are a lot more popular right now. You know, both people downsizing and coming into it. It's the way the market is going now. But that is always a concern of neighbors, you know, and I'm sure, I know there's some here tonight that I met when I walked through it last week. The one thing we did do on the road we have to the south that has the twin homes, pushed it over as far as we could, so it isn't right up next to the 3 existing houses. And I will plant trees or whatever is appropriate along that border too. I don't want to make enemies with neighbors who do that a lot in this business, the way it is. So I'd love your guys' support. I think it's a good development. So, any questions?
Any questions? Commissioner Wolf-Graham.
Thank you, Chairperson Larson, and thank you, Mr. Flipsack. So I've just prepared a few comments. I'm very familiar with C&M Builders, and they're filling a very important niche in our housing market, and that's the need for quality, affordable housing for middle income families and individuals within diverse neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods integrate a variety of family sizes, types, and incomes which is healthy for the neighborhood, healthy for our community, and healthy for the economy. So just to mirror some of Judy's figures, on the spectrum of affordable housing, we usually don't acknowledge the need for single-family home ownership opportunities at an affordable price point for our middle-income families and individuals. So as Mr. Filipczak has said, at $175,000 beginning base price for a twin home, the monthly mortgage payment, including homeowners insurance and private mortgage insurance, is about $756. If you allow for utilities, the monthly housing expenses could easily be under $1,000 a month and most likely around $900. So if you have a household at 60% of the county median income, which right now is about $55,000, and if they're paying a third of their household income for housing, those costs could stay under $1,000 a month. So I very much strongly support the rezoning to move forward on this single-family twin home development. Thank you.
And can I just add that 175 starting price, it isn't a teaser price or anything, that is move-in ready down to appliances. The yards are completely done on every house we build, down to toilet paper holders and mirrors. I mean, they get everything at that price.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Okay, I have one. One of the concerns that we heard, I think it was the last time you were working out by Jeffers Road, was the concern that twin homes get used as duplex rentals. Can you comment on how many of those twin homes that you built the last time have turned into duplex rentals?
In Camden, I held 6 buildings as rentals. The rest are all owner occupied.
Okay. Thank you.
So, and I just do that in a lot of the developments just to hold a few ourselves. We don't sell them as rentals. You know, they're not sold as duplex. They're zoned, usually zoned as twin homes, and eventually we'll sell them, but it's just kind of more a long-term thing.
Okay. Thank you. Did you have another question? Okay. No, that's all right. So I think we're done with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any members of the public who came to speak on this item tonight? Welcome.
Hi, my name's Swanson, and I live at 6385 Aspen Ridge Drive. So this would be my backyard, basically. I have 3 kids. I don't like the idea of twin homes. I would like it all residential. I told Cody that the other day when he visited, because I have 3 young children. That's going to be a lot of traffic for my kids. Right now, they can ride their bikes and they can be out there, and I don't have to worry about it. But with all that traffic coming through, I don't feel secure there, because, like he says, they can be turned into rentals. I'm just not a fan of it. And so I am completely against it. I find that if it's so popular, then why isn't it all built on the south side? Why is it all on the north side? It's oversaturated. We have how many developments over there are already twin homes? Why do we need another set of twin homes? That's how I look at it. So I guess it's just my take on it.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? I see none. Thank you. Anyone else come to speak on this topic?
I'm Bob
Welcome.
Lewis. Good evening. I live at 6377 Aspen Ridge Drive in Eau Claire, and I'm another one that's against it. With the twin homes, you get a lot of people moving in and out. It's almost like apartments it can be. And I just don't, I mean, it really kind of destroys what neighborhood we've got that's R1 at the present. So I'm definitely not in favor of it. And if they want to build twin homes, go somewhere else and build them, if they're so popular. So that's all my objection. Anybody got any questions on that?
I see none. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else come to speak on this topic? welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission members. My name is Wade Nearing. I live at 1346 Caden Court. 3 points. I'm opposed to the twin home portion of this. Just some very frank points. Number one, I don't think this is consistent with the existing character of the Aspen Meadow addition. When we bought it, our house on Caden Court, it was R1. The developer told us that, and let us believe that it was essentially, that was their plan, was this to single-family dwelling, R1 type housing. When we look at the neighborhood, actually to the southwest, you'll already note that we have existing multi-family dwellings there. We have 6 fourplexes. We have approximately 18 twin homes that lie along Aspen Meadow Court. The issue, part of the issue with the twin homes is some of those are in fact owner occupied, and I like those. I have no issues with those. My issue is when they become rental properties. We do see that. You can walk through our neighborhood and you can pretty well pick out which ones are owned and occupied by the owners as opposed to being rental properties. To add the additional number of twin homes, I think if you take a look from a little bit bigger perspective, Caden Court area is starting to get sandwiched, and we're going to become almost feeling like an island there, surrounded by multi-family dwellings, the twins and again the fourplexes to the south. I too see an oversaturation of the twin homes with the existing ones that are to the south of my residence. If you look along Jeffers Road, north of the North Crossing, looking at it at a bigger scheme or perspective, you'll notice that we might as well start changing the name over there to Twin Home City. Going from Jeffers, or on Jeffers, going north of the North Crossing. The new Jeffers Ridge looks like it's slated for about 40 twin homes. Then you go down into Daisy Lane, and there's approximately 30 more, approximately 26 on Green Park. And then when you look at along Shorewood, there's 13, all of which are rental. If you do a real quick Google search, you'll find more opportunities to rent a twin home than you will buying it. I think also from a very, very long range perspective, I would caution this commission that if you start putting in these kind of dwellings in such an oversaturated manner, a lot of these are going to turn into rental properties. And I think you're going to have problems because they're going to increase the amount of service needed by the city, not only with utilities, but law enforcement as well, because eventually some of those could certainly turn into more of a blighted area. You have 1.5 miles of nothing but twin homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lewis, is that your name?
Nearing.
Thank you. Nearing, there we go. I just want to get some feedback from you. The West Side is really historically a blue-collar, mixed community that's very supportive of people that are building assets and moving up socially. So my question to you would be, in the West Side, on that part of our city, how would you suggest that people begin to access affordable housing and buying into the housing market?
Well, right now along Jeffers Road, I think there's ample opportunity. There are more twin homes than single family. In our own neighborhood, at present, it looks like we're going to be outnumbered. And I'm okay with them, don't get me wrong. I have nothing against twin homes. I think C&M actually makes a very nice looking twin home. I just have fears of the potential of those turning into rental properties.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Good.
Any other questions from the commission?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else come to speak on this item tonight? welcome.
Good evening. My name is Sean Bohan, 1504 Sherwin Avenue. I'm the engineer that's working on this project. There were just a couple items that I wanted to point out. I guess first off is just the access into the site, in particular, the access into the twin homes. We're looking for a brand-new entrance off the county highway. We have discussed it with the highway department. We marked it out in the field. They have given us their preliminary approval. We'll get final approval when we send in the engineering plans. So the traffic flow through Aspen Meadows, really isn't going to end up coming through on Aspen Meadows Drive. It's going to be coming through the new entrance out onto Camden and into this portion of the subdivision. And then you end up having the cul-de-sac, Wilder Lane and stuff like that that has all of the twin homes. So the traffic, you're really just not going to end up seeing from the twin homes. The second point ends up being just the depth that we ended up making the twin homes. The developer was very cognizant of the fact that he butts up against single-family homes. So the depth of these end up being about 190 feet, which ends up being 70 feet further than what we end up needing to have for the city. So we want to make sure that that the twin homes, that there's a decent amount of space between those and the single-family homes that are to the west. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch base a little bit on the stormwater. A portion of this, which would actually be the portion that's already in the city that was preliminary platted by Mr. Shepke a number of years ago, the portion that's actually R1 that we're not looking to rezone, that area has been accounted for in the stormwater facilities that are within, the city stormwater facilities along Aspen Meadows or Aspen Ridge Drive. A good portion of that's going to end up going down to them. We do end up having a couple of stormwater facilities that will end up taking care of the newly annexed area. So everything, works decent. We're not going to see an increase in amount of runoff and stuff that wasn't accounted for originally. With that, I'll just take some questions if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? I see none.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public who came to speak on this item tonight? Anyone else to speak on this preliminary plat? All right, I'll see if there's a motion on the commission. Commissioner Wolfgram.
I'll move for approval. Thank you.
And Commissioner Christopherson. Is a second? Any discussion? Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a representative for the City Council for the West Side and am aware of the amount of building that's going on off Jefferson Road. It's really very exciting for the community. It provides a lot of housing that is really very necessary, even for employment. But I'm also really very aware of how anxiety-producing it is for people who have already built their homes and developed their neighborhood, and then they see new building right next to them. But really, I'm on 7th Street. It's an older neighborhood. The homes aren't new. Some of them were owner-occupied or now rentals, and you begin not to worry about the house that is next to you, but the relationship you have with your neighbor. So the way that I have been working in the West Side is building neighborhood associations so that you strengthen the quality of your neighborhood by strengthening the relationships you have with the people that are moving in. So I think that this development has a lot of integrity. It provides a lot of things that our Affordable Housing Task Force has been asking for, and I can only hope that the neighbors that are there would begin to work with them to make it what you want and what you could be happy living next to. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wolfgram.
Thank you, Chairperson Larson. So I would echo that and also remind us that when S.C. Swiderski came in front of us for her very large, I believe it's about 500 mixed types of units, apartments and twin homes. So this is the south side, Highway 12, 312 West Kane Road, that the neighbors initially also had a lot of anxiety that Commissioner Christopherson is referring to and that the neighbors are speaking about tonight. And she ended up meeting with the neighbors, I think, about 4 times before they started to understand the idea of relationship and diverse neighborhoods. So we approved her development, and I see a lot of the same dynamics as Commissioner Christopherson just spoke about present here. So I would hope as well, with 37% of our workforce in Eau Claire not being able to afford a place to live, that we move forward on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission? Oh, Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Chairman. Normally, when you have high-traffic volume roads such as County Trunk Highway F or County Line Road, you have more dense development right next to them to sort of serve as a buffer to the R1 zoning that is further away. I live in R1 zoning off of Stein Boulevard. Within 300 feet of my house are 4 duplexes, 1 8-plex, and 2 apartment buildings. And I am very comfortable with them being within 300 or 500 feet of my home, and I don't see it as a detriment to either my living style or the value of my property. So,
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess one thing, as I think our community learns more about twin homes and their popularity, I think it is important that we be open to the idea of having them located in a variety of neighborhoods and not just like in 1 or 2 parts of town necessarily, because I think they're a good option for a lot of people. And so I guess precisely because they are popular, maybe we should, have them in different places. And maybe at a certain point they'll get, maybe this is the most popular place for them right now, but we should be open to them in different parts of the city beyond the northwest side too.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission? I see none, so we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So that item passes. Item number 3 is a public hearing for approval by the Plan Commission for conditional use permit allowing ground floor dwelling units off-street parking lot for a 2-story mixed-use building at 328 Water Street and 325 Chippewa Street. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you. Before you tonight is a conditional use permit, as you mentioned, along with the site plan. This application does probably look familiar to this commission. It was recommended denial by this commission and was denied back in November of 2019. With that, I would like to note this evening, no application for additional conditional use shall be submitted within 1 year of that submittal. Staff and this commission need to find that new evidence is presented this evening prior to moving this forward for approval. With that, I would mention that this site is number 3 on the map located in downtown on Water Street. The parcel is 2 different parcels. Water Street, 325 Water Street, or 328 Water Street is where the building would go. 325 Chippewa Street would be where the parking lot would go. Here's a location map showing that proposal. You're showing the parcels and aerial photograph. So this evening, the developer and owner of both the parcels is proposing a 2-floor dwelling units on the ground floor, 2 commercial tenants on the ground floor, 4 apartments above on the 2nd floor of the commercial and residential space. Proposed in your packet is the site plan and elevations and floor plans. You're showing the proposed building They have removed the drive-through from the proposal that this commission denied back in November. That drive-through, they did shift the building over slightly, and now they're proposing a sidewalk with landscaping within that walk, accessing from the front to the rear of the property. They're proposing parking off the alley, and then also they're proposing parking on the existing home on Chippewa Street. The parcel on Water Street is approximately 11,000 square feet. The parcel along Chippewa Street is 8,300 approximately square feet. The zoning is not changing with this proposal. The current zoning along Water Street is CBDP. The current zoning along Chippewa Street is RM mixed residential. Here is a floor plan showing the proposals, and then the building elevation, north, south, east, and west. The conditional use tonight is for two of them. One of them, again, as mentioned, is ground floor, 2 dwelling units on the ground floor in central business zoning. It's in the rear of the building as noted on the floor plan. The front of the building would be the 2 commercial sites or commercial tenants. The conditional use permit is to remove the home, single-family home at 325 Chippewa Street for a 25 parking lot, 25 stall parking lot. The Plan Commission would need to determine that this is in compliance and appropriate within the Water Street District Plan and also within the zoning ordinance for the city of Eau Claire. The Water Street bid has reviewed this and recommended support of it. You also provided in your packet the historic Randall Park neighborhood attached a letter and it is in support of it. In your report as well is noted some of the conditions that need to be met. We would prefer the bicycle parking be in the front of the building. The reason being is because this would open it up to not only the tenants that live there, but also any of the visitors along Water Street that are biking to one of the businesses, maybe not these 2 businesses that are proposed, but maybe the coffee shop next door or the tavern down the way or across the street. Also, the commission first will need to determine, like I mentioned, that this application is a significant change, and then they should vote on the conditions that are noted in the report. With that, the applicant is present this evening to answer any questions, and staff is available for any questions at this time.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission for staff? Mr. Peterson.
Yes, Mr. Petrie, would the staff be amenable to allowing some bike parking in the back for privacy and security for the residents and some in front for general use for the businesses in front and others along Water Street?
Yes, we would be. My report notes that it would need to be 3. Probably would make sense 2 along Water Street, maybe 1 on the rear. That'd be fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Thank you, Mr. Petrie. Is the applicant here? Welcome.
Good evening. Joe Miller, 4643 Old Wells Road in Eau Claire. Thank you for taking the time to review the plan again. After last fall, when we came in front of the Planning Commission, we did go back and take another look at the plan. We also met with the Neighborhood Association again. Just sat down and talked with them and talked about what they would like to see with the plan and what type of changes they would like to see with it. As you know, one thing was the drive-through, so we did eliminate the drive-through from the current plan. Another thing was the existing approach on the west side of the building, closest to the Goat Coffee Shop. And we will eliminate that as well, that approach, and put new curb and gutter in there. So that would be gone. Another thing that was a concern for them was that they wanted to see some additional green space in the building. So after talking with them back and forth, what we decided to do and what they wanted us to do is add a sidewalk going from Water Street back to the alleyway to allow pedestrians to walk back and forth through there, and additional green space, shrubbery and annual type plants, things like that. So we do show that on the site plan here. Another thing they wanted to see was was maybe not so wide on the west-hand side. So what we ended up doing is the whole building is going to be shifted 2 feet to the west. So on the initial plan that we brought in front of you, it was a 16-foot wide in between the buildings. Now it's 14-foot wide on the west-hand side of the building. In regards to the parking, we have no problem adding parking on the boulevard, similar to the other bike parking that's on the boulevards on Water Street. And then we would like to keep bike parking towards the rear of it for our tenants as well. One thing that we talked about with the neighborhood was the need for affordable housing in the Randall Park area. So what we're doing now is we're actually partnering with WIDA on this project, and the 2 first floor units are going to be offered for affordable housing. That's what we're doing. So some of the things that kind of come along with that is they need to be ADA acceptable. So that's why those units are being proposed on the first floor. It's a 0 entry to come into the building on the back of it, so they are fully ADA accessible with it. Another thing is not more than 25% of the building can be commercial. And so we're meeting that criteria right now with the front half of the building. 3,000 square feet-ish is commercial, and that meets that 25% requirement that they have. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Commissioner Wolfgram.
Thank you, Chairperson Larson. Well, I just want to acknowledge that I think this is a really wonderful example, Mr. Miller, of you truly partnering with the Neighborhood Association, and when they acknowledge in their letter that you were listening to them and the changes that you're willing to make, I just want to acknowledge that's just a really good thing and a great example for our community, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson?
Just a general question. If you have other developments such as this where the parking is very close but a little bit remote, do you have any problem with enforcing that for your tenants only?
No, we do not. What we do now is we mark all of our parking lots, and they basically say permit parking only type. And then what we do is we actually give every single one of our tenants has a permit that goes in their rearview mirror. So we keep track of all the parking for our tenants. So we know exactly how many tenants utilize parking from us at all times on an annual basis.
If I may add another, is it monitored every so often that if your tenants are complaining they can't find parking spots, do you?
We sure do. Yeah, we do. We go through the parking lots on a weekly basis. However, there are times when tenants will call in and say, hey, there's been a couple cars parking here and we noticed that they don't have your parking passes in it. Can you just come through and take a look and see what's going on? And we have tags that we keep with in our vehicles, and we'll go through and we'll put them on the windshield wiper. Then we take pictures of the license plate so we can kind of keep track if it's a persistent parker. Sometimes it's just a student that's maybe lives further back in the neighborhood and just wants to park a little bit closer and walk the class, and within an hour or so, the class gets done and they leave type of thing. But
just a curiosity point on my part.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, it's generally not too bad of a problem. We monitor it pretty closely, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Miller, and I do want to echo the compliments from Commissioner Wolfgram as well. I think it's great to see working with the neighbors as well as the broader neighborhood. So I guess my question was related to parking as well. I see that 32 stalls are being proposed and the requirement is 29.
Yep.
Do you, I guess, why are you proposing the extra 3 versus like maybe putting in more green space as an alternative?
Sure, that's a great question. We do have, there's 32 stalls proposed altogether. One of the stalls on the far west of the site plan here, that would be a potential spot that would be additional bike parking in the future if necessary, or something along those lines. So there does come circumstances where down the road might have to utilize 1 or 2 of the spots for bike parking, additional trash enclosure, things like that. So how we got it laid out right now, we're kind of covered in the event of that may come up down the road. We also, in the wintertime, then we can use additional parking spots to plow our snow into, which is really beneficial in this area because it can be kind of tight when you do snow. What we do now is we'll kind of plow snow into a certain corner of the lot. Then as it builds up, luckily this winter we didn't have too bad of a winter, but as it builds up, then we truck it out. And we contract it in. They come in with large end loaders and pick it up and haul it out. So it gives us just a little bit of extra space to work with.
I guess as a follow-up question to that. So there's a little bit of extra space on the east end of the parking lot. Is that generally where you'll be plowing the snow to, like?
The back parking lot?
Yeah, for the back parking lot.
Yeah, we'll probably plow it over near the trash enclosure a little bit. What we kind of do is we split the parking lot in half. So we plow a little to the west and a little to the east. The majority of it will go to the east because that's kind of where the natural bioretention area is of it and where the flow of the water will be. So working with the civil engineers, that's kind of where we'll plow the most of it too.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. There is a recommendation from staff about fencing. Do you see that as being a problem?
No, not at all. In fact, we've talked with the neighbor to the west and he did request fencing and I said, that's no problem. We can put fencing in for you.
Okay. I think that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And this is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public who came to speak on this item tonight? Anyone to speak on the conditional use? All right. We'll see if there's a motion on the commission. Commissioner Peterson?
I'll make a motion for approval of the conditional use permit.
Is there a second? Commissioner Brenholm?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Well, I just want to comment that I think there is a significant change. Just the drive-through itself is enough to meet that requirement, so. If there's no other questions or comments, we will call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. Item number 4 is a public hearing for approval by the Plan Commission for two detached accessory structures at 5132 Rivercrest Drive. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you. Number 4 is located on the far north side, north of the airport in the community. The parcel is shown on the aerial map. It's approximately 1.47 acres, currently zoned R1A. The A is for non-sewer. This entire area has city water but not sewer. There's a notification map of the parcel that have been notified at 5132 Rivercrest Drive. The applicant is proposing 2 detached garages at this property. The first one, which is located in the front yard, did receive a variance approval many years ago, and the applicant never actually built the structure. The structure for that one is approximately 30 by 40 or 1,200 square feet. The second detached garage would be 14 by 30 or 420 square feet. That one would be located in the rear of the property. That location has not been finalized by the applicant. The existing garages at this property is 1,210 approximately square feet in size. Total garage area tonight for review is 2,800 square feet. The maximum without a conditional use permit, just for your information this evening, for each garage is 1,000 square feet or combined detached and attached up to 1,500 square feet. As mentioned, this property did receive a variance approval many years ago, but it was for the front yard detached garage. This subdivision, as noted on the aerial, is not a typical subdivision within the city of Eau Claire. I mean, some of us probably wish we had 1.5 acres. Some of us probably don't wish we had 1.5 acres, but the entire neighborhood does have very large homes, very large lots. And along the west side of Rivercrest Drive, they are taking advantage of the buff line and the view line. That's why the homes are significantly farther back than the ones on the east side of the road. I would note this is more like city country than city land. The applicant is proposing to build, like I mentioned, the front garage. This one would be used for storing automobiles, ATVs, and he also has 2 antique fire trucks that you may want to ask him about. The Plan Commission will need to determine that this is not impacting the existing neighborhood. They have reviewed other detached garages similar to this within the neighborhood. The second garage, as shown, is a 14 by 30, and the applicant may explain it a little more. The way he described it to me, it would be where his wife goes to craft or other things as well. So there is no actually overhead door proposed on the elevation. As you can see, it's just an entry door. Some of you might call them a she shed potentially. With that, the Plan Commission will need to review both of the garages this evening. They will be reviewed by a building permit at a future date by our building inspection department. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Petrie? I see none. Thank you. Is the applicant here?
Hi, I'm Scott Burkhardt, and I do live at that address.
Welcome. Did you bring any pictures of your fire trucks?
No, I did not. I probably should have, I guess. It's a couple of antique fire trucks, a 1927 Studebaker and a 1931 Studebaker fire truck.
Wow. I didn't know Studebaker made fire trucks.
Yeah, not many people do, and that's kind of why they're rare and kind of a collectible item. And I do have a background. I did served 30 years with the City of Eau Claire Fire Department, so that's where my passion lies, I guess, and that's kind of what drew me to the collection of the trucks. But right now I have them stored many different locations, and so my goal is to get them back into one area where I can actually have them and, you know, be a little bit more accessible to take them to parades and stuff. So that's my ultimate goal.
Have you gotten any feedback from your neighbors on your project?
Yes, I've talked with the neighbors on both, all 3 sides of my property, and they're more jealous than anything, I think, than.
Any questions from the commission? Mr. Peterson.
I was going to ask why you don't have one building, but since one's going to be a garage for storage of the fire engines and the what is it, 3-wheeler that Julie has?
Yeah.
I used to work with his wife, Julie, at DOT, so, and I know Scott's retired fireman and has 2 very nice-looking antique fire trucks, so. But if the other one's going to be a she shed, I know where she doesn't want to be next to the vehicles, so.
Yes.
And if the neighbors don't mind, I can see it going forward.
Any other questions from the commission? I see none. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public who came to speak on the she shed in the fire engine house? All right. Seeing none, we will see if there's a motion on the commission. Mr. Peterson.
I'll make a motion for approval.
And Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. Second.
Any discussion? I see none, so we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Burkhardt. Item number 5 is a public discussion for approval by the Plan Commission, a site plan for a 7-unit apartment building at 1566 Ball Street. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you. As mentioned, number 5 on the agenda is located east of downtown on Ball Street. The applicant is proposing a 7-unit apartment. The parcel is approximately 14,000 square feet. The existing zoning is R3. The property, as shown, did have a storage unit on it that was not in compliance with the zoning, and that was collapsed by the snowfall last year. We had all the snowfall. The applicant is proposing a 2-story, 32 by 60 footprint for 7 dwelling units. 6 of those dwelling units are 1-bedrooms with 1 bathroom. The 7th unit is a 2-bedroom with 1.5 bathrooms. The parking lot is located on the north side of the property as shown on the site plan. The required parking is noted at 8 stalls. The applicant is proposing 10 stalls. Staff would just note a little concern about the snow removal and ice removal during winter months, especially along the sidewalk on the north side of the property, or north side of the building. It might be a little more cumbersome for his snow removal at this site. The building is lacking canopies on the north side of the building as well that may allow the snow to get farther away from the building. The proposed access is a 24-foot driveway onto Home Avenue, with additional 4 foot of that, within that 24-foot would be for pedestrian connection to the existing sidewalk. The building elevation is shown on the site. The south elevation would be facing Ball Street. I would also note that on the west elevation, there's no proposed windows at this time. The Plan Commission can determine that the appearance of the building and the lack of detail and architecture features, they may require additional windows and any other architecture features as you may wish. The site plan does note foundation plantings and street trees. We do also include the floor plans into your packet. And here's an aerial photograph showing the existing storage unit that has been demolished. Bicycle parking is noted on the site plan. I'll go back to that real quick. It does appear, though, the western stall of the parking lot, you would potentially back right into the bicycle parking, so that needs to be rearranged. The dumpster enclosure is shown on the site plan, and they're also showing pedestrian connections. Exterior lighting shall be provided to be in compliance with city code. Grading and drainage and public utility and traffic and transit is noted. This evening, there's a couple conditions that need to be met, and the commission will have to find that compliant and consistent with the neighborhood for the proposed elevations. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you. Mr. Petrie, with the concern about the ice buildup on the north side, do you have knowledge of the drainage direction? Where would the melted water be going on that lot?
I do not know that answer. I would have to defer that one to the city engineer, and she may know.
It is running to the west property line and down the west boundary toward Ball. On
the west side of the building?
On the completed elevation, yeah, that's.
There you go.
The one that's in our packet has the contour lines in it.
Okay, yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Petrie, could you explain the issue again with maybe a bit more detail with the sidewalk on the north end of the building and then also the connection to the public sidewalk? Because it appears that the pedestrian connection to the public sidewalk is through like a driveway rather than a separate sidewalk. Is that right?
That is correct. Excellent question. So the driveway is 24 feet wide. They're proposing to stripe 4 feet of that for the pedestrian connection, which this commission has approved previously. If you don't think that's appropriate, they can reduce that driveway down to say, it's only a 7-unit apartment. This commission does have the authority to approve it at 20 feet and then have a 4-foot sidewalk that would be separate from it. Or they could reduce that driveway down slightly more. If it is a 2-way driveway, which this would be, but 20 feet, highly unlikely you would have 2 cars, one entering, one exiting at the same time. The other question was the sidewalk along the north end. As proposed, I believe it's a 4-foot wide sidewalk. The concern that staff would have, Mr. Allen noted with winter mission, is the snow runoff, and there would be highly unlikely any sun on that sidewalk. So the property owner and the property management would have to salt it and shovel quite often to get the ice and snow removed from it. The other option this commission would have this evening would be to add some kind of canopy that would get the sidewalk to be safe. But as canopies are, they would run off the canopy and then onto the potential driveway. So then you have another issue, but we just wanted to bring it to your attention this evening.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Thank you. Is the applicant here? Welcome.
Good evening. Nick Semling, S8615 County Road F, Eau Claire, just straight south of town. Nice little apartment building here I'm looking to put up. Be the first apartment building that I'm personally building. My company around town is Construction Management Investment. I've put up a lot of other rental buildings and various other commercial projects in town for a lot of different people, and just kind of getting to the point where I can acquire some land and fill some need also within the city, and it's kind of fun to be there, actually. So with that, Ryan talked about several things. There were a few questions, and maybe you have some concerns, and be happy to address those as needed.
Thank you. Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you. And thank you. I thought this was a very interesting design. I'm going to ask about the windows on the west side when I noticed that they really weren't things that required windows, bathrooms, hallways. I'm wondering if you would see that as a hardship to put smaller windows that would just allow natural light into those parts of the building.
Yep, and I talked about this with Ryan also. I'd be happy to put windows in it. Where the windows fall is in a walk-in closet and a stairway. So I'm not sure I would want a window in my walk-in closet personally, and or a stairway on a second level, although that would allow some natural light in there. In this case, the west side isn't bordering a street, and there's lots of vegetation there where the building's gonna sit. So I saw it as a non-impact to put windows in, just to spite put windows in those rooms. If it were a living room or a bedroom, definitely would go in there. I'd have to do a lot of redesigning, I think. Otherwise, it's kind of weird to have them in that spot to me, but that's why.
Thank you. Commissioner Wolfgram.
Thank you, Mr. Semling.
Yes.
So I was talking to someone who shared with me that Countrified has done a few small homes
Yes.
built on slab in older neighborhoods on infill lots, and they were quite affordable. I believe he said in the 150s, and I'm just wondering if you can verify that.
Yes, so that's my development company's Countrified Investments. I created it about a year and a half ago. So 2 blocks away on Madison Street there, I built a new home 2.5 years ago, and it was 840 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 2-car garage house, and actually that sold for $129. And then on Cochrane Street last year I built, which is up by Birch Street, relatively the same size, sold around the same price range. That was a 1-stall car garage though. On Putnam Street, relative to this area, again, a little bit smaller actually because the lots are very narrow. They're 33 feet wide, but I've created a design mechanism to put these smaller houses on. So they're selling like in that 130 range for a smaller house. I also have a lot on Franklin Street that I have a design out there right now where it's a little bit bigger home, 3-bedroom house. So that goes for closer to the 147 range. But yeah, trying to maximize these little lots that are available. And it's an interesting dynamic though, who likes to get into these houses. In Eau Claire, they want to see them built, people do, before they get in because they can't visualize it. I put one in Chippewa Falls, and when I put the design online, it sold instantly before I even built it. So a little bit more foresight in Eau Claire to want to see what it looks like. But yeah, and that's the whole concept behind this is having smaller apartments. You know, a lot of River Prairie and different places are building these apartments and they're charging $1,100 for 1 bedroom and stuff. And I'm targeting like $795 with water, sewer included and garbage in that. And then I've even contacted L.E. Phillips locally for maybe some of the people that work there would maybe be interested because the bottom units are Class B handicapped is what they are. We don't have to have full handicap, but they are handicap accessible with upgrade availability very easily. That's our design concept behind it.
So I just wanted to acknowledge a developer that is committed to being very creative with affordable housing, single family and multi-family. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for your creativity in finding these places to build homes in the community. One of the questions is this west elevation that's up on the screen right
Yes.
now in the window topic. I see that on the first floor bedroom, there's one window facing to the south.
that-
You could probably put
Yep.
one facing the west as well. That seems like to be the biggest opportunity. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I was thinking of the second floor when I looked at my design, but yes, you could definitely do it there, and that wouldn't impede the design at all.
Any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Gregor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other issue that was brought up earlier was like snow removal and ice control and this north-facing sidewalk. Do you have thoughts on how to rectify that, as well as there's also the conflict point with the bike parking and the car parking? Could
Sure.
you explain how you'd address that?
Yeah, so as far as the snow removal goes, in typical building designs in a city, the sidewalk is elevated by 4 or 5 inches above the pavement below, which would make it complicated for snow plowing, right? In this case, my proposal, because the first floor is ADA accessible, is the sidewalk will be right in line with the pavement for drainage purposes, which means a standard snowplow truck can come in there in one swipe and hit that sidewalk and take that right off that backside. So the buildup of ice in that area would be very low because the snowplow is able to get close by with light shoveling next to the building. As far as the bike parking in the turning area, I didn't realize that I could put in less stalls than 10 until I saw this packet come out. The engineer and I didn't have that conversation, so there's a high potential we could move that location to a different spot even, and make it easier for snow plowing and snow removal, and maybe reduce the site by a lot or so to gain some green space.
I guess just as a follow-up to that, too, the one potential space for the bike parking could also just be closer to the street as well, on the kind of the south or the east side of the building.
Yeah.
So and just to clarify, the sidewalk is proposed to not be at not to have a curb essentially with the.
Correct.
Okay.
That was my thought process
Okay.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess the concern I have is if you're plowing that with like a machine, basically, you're going right up to the doors and someone could just like walk right out the door and
I suppose
have
they
an issue
could.
with that. So I'm just trying to figure out, that situation.
And I guess, if it was your recommendation, or even Ryan, that we do put a curb in there to mitigate that, being on the north side of the building, when it snows and the way the wind blows, I don't see an accumulation happening there, and it's a shingle roof system, so none of the snow is sliding off in that spot to create a buildup like a pole barn or some sort of ag building might, where the snow just dumps off and creates mounds of snow. That's where you get that significant ice buildup. We could put the canopies in like we talked about, but again, that pushes it out to the parking lot, and really, shingle roofs do not lose any snow. So it might be just a little bit of blowing snow on that backside.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there a motion on the commission for this? Commissioner Wolfgram
I'll move for approval.
and Commissioner Granlund.
I meant to indicate earlier that I'm not going to be voting on this. I just
Oh.
want to make that clear before we get to the voting part.
Okay. Mr. Brentholt.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? Mr. Peterson.
Whether the sidewalk is at the same level as the driveway or raised 4 inches, they're still going to need to do that hand snow removal next to the building. And I think, just so the snowplow doesn't make a mistake, it'd be nice to have a 4-inch lip there for him to put his blade against in case for some unforeseen reason, he'll slide towards the building. They're going to have to do hand removal anyway, next to the building, whether they can plow part of the sidewalk themselves. So I would recommend, not require it, but recommend they have a 4-inch raised sidewalk in that area.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion? Commissioner Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do think this is a great example of a creative project and way to build more housing in a neighborhood that needs it. I do want to propose an amendment that would add that window on the west side of the building from the bedroom, and that would also create a raised sidewalk from the building that is 4 feet wide and actually extends all the way to Holm Avenue, or to the sidewalk at Holm Avenue, rather than being part of the driveway, which would essentially reduce the driveway width by that amount. So if there's a...
Okay, is there a second for that amendment? Commissioner Christopherson. Any discussion on the amendment? Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. I guess the only concern I might have with having a curb there would be, is that going to affect the ADA situation? And I don't know who would answer that. Maybe the developer.
I could certainly attempt to answer that too. I mean, certainly there could be a curb cut at an appropriate location to be able to accommodate ADA, and so that could be something that I would consider a friendly amendment to allow for any sort of curb cut to allow for ADA. So
I think I'll invite the applicant up to speak on that.
Hi, Dan Knowlton. I work at Everyday Surveying and Engineering. When I was looking at it just now, I was like, we should have a curb there. But if you have for example, if you have a 4-inch curb, you need to have a taper so it matches up to the, the sidewalk. It goes up and then it matches the rest of the sidewalk. But if the sidewalk is only 4 feet wide and you have a 4-inch raise, you can, you need that width to get the height change. You're not supposed to have the dip in the, the up and down in the walkway path. It gets complicated. It'd be nice to have the curb. I thought that right away, but then I realized that it might affect the ADA routing. There's a lot of rules on it. You should look it up sometime.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, what you're telling us is that it would be difficult to do an ADA ramp on the curb with the sidewalk only 4 feet wide.
Yeah, because you're supposed to have a 3-foot additional width for wheelchairs to go around. That's not in the sloped area. The sidewalk's like this, and then it drops down to match the pavement, and it's flat, then it goes back up. Behind that sloped area, you have to have 3 additional feet for a guy in a wheelchair to roll by without going down the ramp and back up.
Okay, so having the curb would make,
It kind of
it would make it less ADA accessible.
It violates some rule, yeah. It'd violate the ADA
Some rules.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Commissioner Gregor.
So I'd like to amend my amendment, if that's okay, to not have it have a curb, but I do think it's important that it be, a different type of surface, like a concrete surface for all the way from along the sidewalk that I'm proposing, rather than a blacktop, for example.
So, could you restate your amendment as you want it now?
So my motion would be to have for an amendment would be to have a window on the west side of the building from the bedroom on the first floor, plus a 4-foot sidewalk that is like a concrete sidewalk all the way to the Holm Avenue sidewalk. Yeah, without the 4-inch curb. Yeah.
Okay. And is that acceptable to the seconder? All right. Any other discussion on this amendment? All right, we'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, and we're back to item number 5 as amended. Any other discussion? All right, we'll call the question on the site plan for a unit apartment as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I see none. Congratulations, thank you. Item number 6 is a public discussion for recommendation to City Council for a trail easement on Marquette Street. Ms. Ness.
Good evening. Item number 7 is near North High School on Marquette Street. It is an existing trail connection between Western Avenue and Star Avenue that would be amended. Currently, the city owns the eastern parcel, which runs along Western Avenue, and Northern States Power Company, Excel, we've been working with them, who owns parcels A, B, and C. And the city has worked with them to develop an agreement to move the trail so it would all be on their parcels and the existing city parcel, and not be encroaching onto the property owner's parcel just north of this location. So we're asking for approval to move forward with the agreement with Excel for those easements.
Okay, any questions from the commission? All right, thank you. And the city is the applicant. Is there a motion? Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. So moved.
Commissioner Peterson.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion? All right, we'll call the question. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that passes. And item number 7 is, begins with a 5-year comprehensive plan review discussion. Mr. Ivory.
Good evening. I'm kind of subbing in for Scott tonight. He's somewhere between Buffalo and Cleveland at the moment on his way back. So we wanted to have a kind of a brief discussion tonight about the comp plan, kind of where we're going with that. And a couple of things I just wanted to kind of touch upon that I think Scott has mentioned in the previous couple of discussions, but that is part of the comp plan that was adopted in 2015, that we are looking at this as an update of the primarily the plan implementation chapter. It's not a rewrite of the plan, so we need to kind of keep that in mind in terms of that we are looking at doing an update. Back in 2011, when we updated the 2005 plan, we did hire a consultant back at that time. The consultant was hired for about $15,000 in order to do the work. And he worked through a process of 3 meetings, working with the task force at that point in time. We did ask for funds for a consultant for this update project last year as part of the budget, but those funds were not approved. So we're dealing with an update where we are not able to use a consultant as part of the project. So it'll basically be a staff-driven type of an update. Back in 2011, when we did have the consultant probably did about 80% of the work, and then staff basically kind of picked up the behind him and did about 20% of the work, essentially kind of more meeting organizing, kind of going through the consultant's notes and then finalizing and making presentations to the Plan Commission. The meetings that we will have for the update this time around, we do need to have staff present at all the meetings, whether that's for the main task force or for any subcommittee meetings, and that's important to provide some consistency, coordination, and uniformity between all of those different meetings. So it's very important that we do have staff present at all these different meetings, since this really is being done under the auspices of the Plan Commission. The staff does have some time constraints coming up that you probably are aware of, that Scott has probably talked about in terms of what the Housing Opportunities Commission that'll be coming online in the next month or so. We'll be working on staffing that, providing the orientation to the new members and kind of getting them started. And then we'll be working with the participatory budget task force that'll be going on during the summer and the fall also. And then some possible ordinance updates, possibly what the next item that we'll be talking about tonight, some parking changes possibly. So there are a number of things on our plate. The time frame that we're anticipating for this is somewhat up in the air due to some of the current events that are occurring right now. But those aside, what we were anticipating was probably starting the update in August, September, October, kind of working through that time frame. Rather than doing it during the middle of the summer, typically that's more difficult in order to get people involved with the task force because of just other commitments. So we'd be looking at probably trying to organize that and start in August and then work through September, October, maybe a little bit in November, but basically the fall months is what we anticipated. So with that in mind, Scott and I talked about the process a little bit more yesterday as he was driving. Actually, yesterday he was driving eastbound. Today he's going westbound. But we would like to kind of discuss or propose somewhat of a hybrid in terms of between what was done back in 2011 and that of forming like 7 or more subcommittees. We feel that this would provide an opportunity to provide a good opportunity for public input that we've talked about that we feel is very important, but would reflect our ability as staff in order to basically to schedule and be at these different meetings. So kind of generally what we are proposing or suggesting would be to have an overall update committee or task force that we've talked about before. That committee could be anywhere from 21 to 30 people, depending on what the Plan Commission feels. And we would get into more of a discussion with the Plan Commission in terms of that number as we went forward. That initial committee then, that overall committee would have an initial organizational meeting. And again, that would be either in August or September of some time. We would go over the background information in terms of the importance of the comp plan, what the comp plan is, kind of review some general summaries of what each of the chapters are so the committee has some familiarity with each of those 13 or 14 chapters. And then we would propose to basically divide that larger task force into four subcommittees. Each of those subcommittees would be assigned to 3 chapters within the comp plan. I think some of the discussions you've had before was taking a look at maybe just looking at 7 different chapters. I think our feeling is that we need to have this committee basically look at each of the chapters. Some of the ones that hadn't been discussed before was the neighborhood chapter, the downtown chapter, historic preservation. Those were some that really haven't been talked about before. So we think that all 13 of those chapters need to be looked at in some regard. And then we would have a discussion with the Plan Commission in terms of how we want to divide up those with the 4 subcommittees, how we want to divide up the 3 chapters per committee. I have some suggestions, but we would have that discussion at a later date in terms of how you want to divide those 3 chapters up. Some of those chapters kind of fit fairly well together. For example, like land use and transportation and things like that. So we'd like to bundle those together so they kind of make some sense. At the meeting, we would ask the committee members which of the subcommittees they would have a preference for. We'd ask them basically to provide their preference ranking from 1 to 4 in terms of what their their highest preference is and then what their lowest preference is. And then we would ask them to, and then what we would do from that, since we would have their preference ranking for the 4 committees, if we get a large number of people that sign up for one particular group, we would basically put those numbers in a hat, and we would pick, if we want to have 5 members per subcommittee or 6 members, we would pick 6 basically out of a hat. If we had 10 people that were interested in that particular committee, and then kind of go down the line, so everybody would have an equitable and fair chance of being in one of the 4 subcommittees. With that, then each of the subcommittees would have the opportunity to meet during a given period of time. Maybe a matter of that they just have to meet once, or maybe they might want to meet twice, kind of depending on what their topic areas are. And this would give them an opportunity, if we want to invite other community members into those smaller discussions, we certainly can do that. Each of these meetings would be publicly noticed. And as I mentioned before, we would then, staff would provide kind of the facilitation for each of these smaller meetings also. So once that period is completed, then we would have a second meeting of the larger group, the full committee, and each of the subcommittees would report back in terms of what their recommendations were in terms of amendments to the implementation plan. We would have an overall discussion with that larger group, and then we would probably have some kind of an exercise at the end of that meeting, kind of like a dot matrix type of a situation where people, the whole committee, could basically choose their preferences in terms of how they feel, in terms of what the different recommendations would be in terms of the priorities. After that meeting, staff then would go back, review the information that was basically presented at that second meeting, and the priorities that were given by the individual members. We'd come back then for a third meeting with the full group with recommendations in terms of what that final revised implementation chapter would be. We'd present that to that committee, and then based on that, we would bring that forward to the Plan Commission for a recommendation. So as part of that, in Scott's memo, he did mention the possibility of holding a Plan Commission work session. And the Plan Commission work session would really work out some of the details of what I've talked about here in terms of which chapters would be assigned to each subcommittee, the number of people that we might want to have in each of those subcommittees. So some of those details we'd work out in the Plan Commission work session. We could either do that separately, similar to what the City Council does, where they have a work session, or if we happen to have a light Plan Commission at some point in time, we could maybe fit it into one of our meetings in the evening. So that was kind of what our suggestion is. I guess you wanted to get some feedback from the commission tonight in terms of, we feel this would provide ample opportunity for some community input, but it kind of provides some ability for us that we feel we can staff these different meetings on and meet some of our other needs also.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Wolfgram.
Thank you, Mr. Ivory. In terms of the application process for this steering committee, what are you considering?
Well, one of two things. That would be something that the Plan Commission could talk about as part of that work session.
Okay.
What we did back in 2011 is that we went back to the members that were actually involved in the original adoption of the 2005 plan to see if they were interested, and a number of them were. And then we went out and we did a press release in order to try to find out if there were more interest for people. So we could do something like that. We also could go out and contact the different neighborhood associations to see if they're interested, or any other community-based organizations to see if there's multiple ways we can go about doing that, and we're open to suggestions from the Plan Commission.
So that's something then that would be discussed at that Plan Commission work
Yes.
session, and we'd all agree on that?
Yep.
Okay. another question, is it okay with you? I understand that the pressure of how this is being driven really by staff overload, and I get that because we're not going to have a consultant, but you know, the importance of this in terms of this being a comprehensive plan review for the planning of our city, that's concerning to me. The citizen engagement part of it, were you initially thinking only about the public notice of these established meetings that we'll be planning as the only citizen engagement right now that you're thinking about doing?
Well, what we're proposing would be, well, all of these meetings are public meetings, so all of these would be open to the public. We'd have the 3 meetings of the larger committee, and then those meetings of the 4 subcommittees, those would be open to the public too, and we would give those, again, those would be all publicly noticed types of meetings too. So there's really would be, you'd have the 3 larger meetings, you'd have at least 4 of the subcommittee meetings, so we're looking at a minimum of 7 opportunities for the community to provide input as part of the process. If one or more of those subcommittees decide that they need to meet twice because of just the volume of what's in those chapters, we could be looking at, you know, maybe 8 or 9 opportunities for the community. So, you know, we think that's, you know, a fair reflection of trying to provide some input.
So this is open to our discussion at a future date at a work session?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because I really believe that we need to do some very intentional outreach so that we really get to a lot of our more diverse communities within our community.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So not to take a lot of time, but for instance, what recently happened with the county and their recent listening sessions pretty much fell flat, because you really need to go to the community leaders in those communities to be able to reach people in all parts of our city. So, you know, as long as I know that we'll be discussing that at some point, then I'm good with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Christopherson.
Thank you. I'd like to just piggyback on that, Mr. Ivory. I've been in some of the listening sessions for the last, I don't remember what we were talking about, but it was an update of some sort, and they met over at RCU. And it does become very difficult for the community at large to figure out if it's something at a level that they can interact with the information. Are they being told what the city's deciding in your passive audience? So I think that this multi-level is a really good way of presenting it, having citizen leaders on these subgroups, but I think that it really falls to the community to become engaged and for neighborhoods to agitate people. This is really important. This is information that lasts, you know, it's going to be in the next update, and it's going to be the foundation of the next 10-year plan. So as opposed to wondering about how the city's going to put this out there, I think right away we have to recognize that we're going to put it out there because it's that important. But I like what you've said. I think it's a good.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ivory, one of the things that came to mind, you know, after serving on the last update committee, there were a few chapters that were created kind of separately from the comprehensive plan process, the health chapter and the sustainability chapter. Mm-hmm. So essentially, are those added in among those that you're thinking of?
Well, what happened back in 2011 when we did the 5-year update, essentially, was we didn't actually do the health chapter at that point in time. It was one of the recommendations that came out of the update that over the next 5-year period before we did the 2015 plan, is that one of the recommendations was that we do a health chapter. So that could very well be a recommendation that comes out of this process. I would anticipate, for example, when we, as part of the neighborhood chapter, there are, I can see 2 neighborhoods in particular, actually 3 neighborhoods in particular that are really do either need a neighborhood plan or need an update of a neighborhood plan. And I think through this process, we might be able to kind of more pinpoint which of those 3 neighborhoods are higher priority possibly. So I would see an outgrowth or a recommendation is that we do either a new neighborhood plan for one of these neighborhoods or we update one of those. So I guess to answer your question, I think that easily could come out of this process.
So that is, because I could try to rephrase my question a bit more too, is that sustainability chapter and the health chapter, are those going to be reviewed for update?
Oh, okay.
Because, I mean, we obviously just did this renewable energy action plan that touches on so much more detail for sustainability, at least, and touches on health to an extent too. But.
Yeah, I hadn't talked with Mr. Allen about that. I guess that's something that's open for discussion that we can talk about when we do our work session. That if we do choose to do that, I guess those would be rather than looking at 13 chapters, we'd be looking at 15 chapters. So we certainly could bundle those into one of the subcommittees.
Any other discussion from the commission? Mr. Gregor?
Because I guess just expanding on my questioning, so those are considered like full-fledged chapters, is that
correct?
Correct. Okay. So so they would just be. I guess when I look at the comprehensive plan we have from 2015, it'll just be 15 instead of 13 is what you mentioned, right?
Right.
And then neighborhoods was added like at the same time, so that was.
They're
that's
part
last
of
update.
they're part of the comprehensive plan, and we consider them as another element or another chapter of the comp plan. We also have other elements of the comp plan, which, like all of our neighborhood plans, are considered part of the comp plan. Our bike and pedestrian plan is considered part of the comp plan, but we don't anticipate. I guess the more I think about it, we don't anticipate diving into each of the neighborhood plans. We don't intend diving into the bike and pedestrian plan. If we looked at doing an update of that, that would be a separate project. So I'd anticipate, I guess the more I think about it, and again, this could be a discussion of the Plan Commission, but the sustainability chapter and the help chapter are relatively new chapters. So I think we can certainly take a look at the implementation section of those chapters, but I don't think we would take a real deep dive into them.
Any other questions or discussion? I see none. So what I sense is a general consensus among the commission toward the plan that was explained to us. Agreed? Okay.
All right. So we'll take a look at, kind of see what things happen over the next month or so and see what seems to be the best way to have this work session for the Plan Commission. And we'll keep in touch with the chair and we'll kind of go from there then.
Sure.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you. Next is discussion on land use. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you. The Director of Community Development, not myself, Mr. Allen, wrote a memo to the Commission this evening to talk about light manufacturing and production in C3. We received a letter from a property owner, Mr. Dye. He's consolidating and purchasing the home furniture building on Mall Drive with the hopes of consolidating all his businesses that are located in Altoona, Eau Claire, and surrounding areas. One of the businesses that he has currently operates in the downtown and central business zoning, which is not even permitted under the light manufacturing and production. So right now, he's non-conforming as well, but he's proposing to move that business to the home furniture under the C3 zoning, and the staff noted the light manufacturing and production. My understanding, what he does is a machine shop, light machining, and he also is working with a coffee roaster that's currently located in Banbury to consolidate into one operation. Mr. Dye provided the letter that is attached in your packet. Staff would like to have a discussion about land uses within C3. You might have saw in the news, it was probably about 30 days ago, that our vacancy rate has increased significantly over the last year, actually the last 5 years in retail. It's one of those unfortunate things that the big box stores, there's just less of them, and they're closing at a rate that we need to potentially approach it as a different approach. My understanding is Mr. Dye's other businesses that are relocating to this site are permitted uses under the C3. Mr. Allen did put in the report too, where his previous city in Blue Springs, Missouri, just outside of Kansas City, Missouri, light industrial and craft manufacturing use group. Just some of the terminologies and uses and definitions within that community. Each community obviously is a little different within the C3. My previous community as well, in Longview, Texas, just outside of Dallas area, they did allow for light manufacturing as a component within the C3, with the understanding that it would be potentially a permitted use or a conditional use, or whatever this discussion goes, and the Plan Commission would prefer it to be. With that, we're just talking about different land uses within the C3. Obviously, if this was like a UPS relocation, they would be permitted under the warehouse and distribution, or FedEx, for example, or Amazon takes it over. They would all be permitted, even though they probably have more truck traffic than this particular use. That would be allowed today. If we want to look at a bigger, broader picture, obviously Shopko closing, potentially other stores closing. I don't know how we would address land uses within C3 going forward. So we wanted to have a conversation with this commission and get some guidance and some direction.
Mr. Wolfgram.
Mr. Petrie, thank you. So I really like, we have to approach with a different approach. I like that. Being my nerdy self and very interested in makers districts, I went back to a 2014 planning journal, and I know you know this, and many of us probably know this, that across the country, a lot of middle-sized city planners are examining ways to allow makers and even residents to settle side by side, often in the same building. I just want to share a quote. In the old days, you did your manufacturing in one place, your office was somewhere else, and your shop in still another location. This is Lori Feinberg, Assistant Director of Baltimore's Department of Planning. Now all three functions are blending, and zoning codes are not up to date in acknowledging that. So I know that future agenda items are coming up later, but I really want to suggest that we begin to update our zoning codes, because this really is the future, I think, for all the reasons that you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Granlund.
Recently had a project that took place in a facility that had once been a farm to can style production facility, and over the years it got carved up into separate pieces. One of the big issues we had with even giving a recommendation to the occupant of it was, where did the boundary exist and where did the firewall exist? I think the difference between food processing and metal processing, you're right up there with what can be allowed in the same building. Whether or not it happens to fit a zoning code, you may have problems with occupancy type. And occupancy type will be judged by the building code, not by the zoning code. So I would be kind of careful. I was looking at this as having something quite similar to the artisan forge type process. This person having a single umbrella business, I think would still need to treat his sub-businesses essentially as tenants and work around separations based on a tenant structure as well, because you may have some very, very different levels of fire protection, fire protection is the main thing, and then some of the issues with regard to the higher density of occupancy. If you're serving coffee as well as roasting coffee, you get very quickly how many tables, how many chairs, how many exits, toilet use. This is a very large building with some, like I say, these are rather uncommonly grouped elements. That home furniture was once part of a mall and would have had a tenant structure within a mall environment at its original. I don't think it's unlikely to treat it similarly, but I think that some of these really have to be treated as their component use, not as a single wide open zone between these processes.
Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate what Commissioner Granlund has shared. The comment I would make at this point, this boggles my mind a little bit because, I don't have that specificity, but I love the idea that there's something else and that our direction would be to inspectors to find the way to make it work instead of saying absolutely not, we're not going to do that because it doesn't meet zoning. So as we begin this conversation, that would be the direction I would want to go, is how can we make it easier, and our job would be to make it happen safely as opposed to saying, no, Eau Claire doesn't do that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Gregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Petrie. I guess, one thing that I do want to be open-minded to, and as part of the discussion, is it sounds like there's a lot of factors here, but I'm very open-minded to the idea of doing something, but I also tend to like to start with conditional use as a way to dabble, I guess, into this kind of thing, but I need to learn a lot more to know what that looks like. Overall, I think that there are some kind of awkwardly placed commercial buildings that would work pretty well in a more industrial use, or don't have very good visibility, or are next to highways or things like that. And I think this is kind of a perfect example of a building that is, could have some serious potential as compared to what it has right now. So, and I think it dovetails really well with what we're talking about for the Cannery District, where we want to showcase the making of things, and how do you not have to feel like you're doing a factory tour in order to learn about how things are made and where your food comes from, or where how you make things. So, but the truck traffic thing I think was mentioned earlier, and that was a component I didn't think of right away, where it's what kind of traffic is it bringing? What kind of, could it be putting other businesses in danger, or could there be noise issues, dust issues, things like that? So we have to be very careful with this, but I think we need to devote time to it, so, yeah.
Okay, any other comments? All right, I just want to add too that I think it's great that we're sort of thinking outside the box here, to overuse a phrase, but I'm really happy that we're open-minded about this kind of thing, so.
Okay, thank you.
Is that good? All right. And then any code compliance items? Seeing none, future agenda items. And I guess my question is there any prognosis on any restrictions for meetings? What's the discussion among staff with that regard?
It's changing hourly, essentially. So we'll keep the commission posted on our next meeting. I think do we have a public? So it looks like we do have a public hearing item for our next meeting. That kind of drives in terms of our meeting schedule somewhat. There has been some indication now over the last couple hours about meeting size limited to actually going from 50 down to 10 now. So we'll have to have some discussions about that. So as this evolves, we'll keep the commission posted, and we did try to make some modifications to the room tonight to address the situation, and but we'll keep you posted.
Okay, thank you. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? All right, without objection then, this meeting is adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.